Hello there, everybody. This is Joe Roof, formerly of Cal Football and now president of the Big C Society. Together with us today are Robert Paler, the incoming executive director of the Big C Society, Jake Wilson, the liaison director for men's soccer at Cal, and who's also on the Big C Society board of directors, and our special guest, Joey Zwillinger, formerly of Cal men's soccer and now co-founder of the ubiquitous and wildly popular Allbirds shoe company and co-CEO. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, man, you're brave. We're going to have to dive into the emotional complexity of the co-CEO challenge later. All right. So for our listeners, here's a little quick background, Cal background on Joey. You played soccer for the Golden Bears around the turn of the millennia with 1 year under Coach Grimes. Is that right?
Yeah.
And then you were in 2 varsity letters, I think, in 2000 and 2001.
Yep.
And graduated with BS in industrial engineering and operations research.
That's right.
All good so far. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So tell me, the story of phase 1 period of your life, which we'll define as like beginning with the day you graduated, and that further encompasses your time at Goldman and then Deloitte, and then as an associate at Industry Ventures, and then finally getting your MBA at Wharton. I just want to mention that this is a pretty well-worn pathway, even if it's a rarefied one among people who prioritize accounting and finance as kind of foundational business skills. So I'm just interested if you could tell us the whole story, like why you chose it, what surprised you, how much you knew about the path in advance, and like all the roles they're in.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. And I put myself back about 20 years and think about how nebulous and abstract the world after college looked like at the time. I'll try to position myself there and speak to my younger self, but I could see something like this being really helpful. So it's great that you guys are pulling it together. But I guess I'll go back. When I was, I started as a student athlete in 1999 at Cal, and I knew I wanted to do something in math, science, that kind of area. And so I picked engineering because I thought it was challenging and interesting. I didn't frankly know all that much about what it would be. Started as a mechanical engineer, actually. And somebody one day told me that mechanical engineers are in basements smoking piles of cigarettes and getting very exhausted doing AutoCAD drawings. And I was like, wow, that sounds terrible. I don't think that's what mechanical engineers actually do. So that was probably wrong advice. Yeah, but it was enough to scare me. So I looked at a few different majors, and I ended up, thinking my parents were psychologists, and I was really interested in the idea that people run business. And so I thought industrial engineering was this blend of organizational design, organizational development, what people do and what structures do you put in place to motivate and train people to make more effective business outcomes. That seemed sort of interesting. So I dove in and started doing that. And that led me to actually be interested in the idea of human resources as a career. So I was in a cafe down on College Avenue, and some guy rolls over to my table and knows the girl that I was studying with at the table. And he was asking me what I wanted to do. And I said, I wanted to do HR. And he's like, well, my company has HR. They do internships. Do you want to like give it a shot? I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. What's the company called? And he said, Goldman Sachs. And I was like, okay, that's like 2 Jewish guys. I'm Jewish. That sounds like a good idea. Let's see what we can do. So I ended up doing an internship at Goldman Sachs in New York City. And that was my first professional experience. And I kind of tell you that path to make sure that everyone feels who's listening to this understands that if you have no clue what business is and you have no clue what Goldman Sachs is, that's totally fine. Yeah. And serendipity can play a big role in your life, and having confidence in yourself and just rolling with the punches sometimes is also a good strategy. But I entered Goldman Sachs, and I had a really wonderful and a very significant growth experience there, learning about business, learning about HR, demystifying what HR is, realizing that HR isn't really the front line of what is managing a business. And through that internship, I realized I wanted to be on the front line. And got some great coaching from people that were very supportive of me at Goldman Sachs, incredible company. And I had a truly tremendous time there. And that led me actually to, what do you do? What do you do after college? And I still had basically no clue what business was. And, Yeah, I would remember back that if somebody told me they were a business person, uh, that just seemed like specific enough to me to be a good answer. And now, if you told me you're a business person, I'd be like, "Come on, what do you do? What industry? What's your function? What's your position? Like, how are you financed?" Like, I'd go, 75 questions deeper. But back in college, I didn't know, so I joined Deloitte Consulting to like really learn a broad basis of what does business do, some different industries, and just dive in and be curious. And so that was a
So
pretty cool idea. Yeah.
by management consulting, you mean, so you were flying out Sunday night or Monday morning, you're on site with the client, until Thursday, then you fly home and you're like trying to solve some problem that the company wants your help with, as either as sort of an individual or as a part of a team. Is that the management kind of consulting
Yeah,
that you're talking about? Yeah.
that's exactly right. And just understanding what I learned there, a few different things. Like there's a lot of crappy stuff that you have to do on a daily basis when you're a consultant. You're sifting through a ton of data, and can be mind numbing at times. The most important lesson I learned there was you're always going to learn something, no matter what it is, and making sure that you find out exactly what there is to learn, and being intellectually curious is, I think, it's the most important thing in life, frankly, and it's for sure true in work. Is just like being optimistic and knowing that the bad stuff, there's always silver linings, even if it's bad, and being curious enough to and doing a good job on it so that you keep opportunity open for your next project and whatnot. That was one thing I learned. The second is to come into situations, and this is true no matter what, but particularly in consulting, you're like a 23-year-old, you might be smart, but you are coming into an industry and meeting with executives at companies who have forgotten more than you'll ever know about their industry. And having a humility when you come in and you drop into a client site, and having that framework in your mind while addressing problems and trying to add value and help is something that, even when you do know a lot about the industry, I think continues to be really important. And so I just learned a ton about a ton of different industries, management styles, some very polished and sophisticated, some kind of gunslinger, shoot from the hip style management teams. And that was awesome. And it demystifies things, because then you're like, okay, business can kind of be whatever you want it to be. And if you run the show, like, you get to make a lot of decisions, and you create something. And that really sparked some of my fire for entrepreneurship. And that led me down the path that has now been the rest of my career so far.
Nice. Yeah. Charlie Munger says something similar. That guy had seen Warren Buffett on that subject. He's like, we always assume that we're probably making a mistake and that we don't have all the information, as opposed to the opposite. Some
Yeah.
people think they know everything, and like, they have all the information. He's like, that makes us, he goes, we consider that one of our competitive advantages, just that mindset alone.
Yep.
So then you go to Wharton, you get your MBA, and actually, just before that, you're an associate at venture capital company. And so my understanding of this job is you do a lot of research on companies that the general partners are considering making an investment in. Is that right?
Yeah, looking for new opportunities and sourcing them, and then doing some research to understand whether it's a smart investment or not, and then negotiating with the management teams of those companies to see if you can get some money in.
Were you covering renewables there for?
That was when I started to really tip into that space. And so, somebody around that time gave some great career advice. I think it was just a panel talk or something, but it really resonated with me, which was, the best thing you could have done in the, 1980s, if you were graduating college, was to get into the, information technology, computer ecosystem. If you were doing anything in that space, you were growing transferable skills in an industry that was going to be a 50-year tidal wave of something. And you were solving big problems along the way. So even if you had a failed step in one direction, you were setting yourself up for success for that next step. And I took that advice, and then I blended that with something that my dad had told me, which was, he didn't really care what I did in life in terms of choosing what job I did. But he did care that it contributed to society, and that it was bigger than just putting food on the table for myself and my family. And it contributed in a positive and meaningful way to society, and being a productive member of our species. And so for me, it was the environment. And I knew, this is, call it like 2005, 2006. Climate change was the problem of our generation. If we didn't deal with it in our generation, our kids and grandkids were going to be really, really terribly off. Turns out it happened a lot faster than I expected. And we're in a much worse place than I ever considered we would be by 2020. But that was having that significant of a multi-generational challenge, and then having an opportunity to do something dynamic from entrepreneurship, small business with high growth and high aspirations and a disruptive approach to industries. That's an interesting intersection. And for me, that was where I got really hungry to connect entrepreneurship with solving climate change and making a positive impact on the environment. So I started looking at a whole host of companies across software and IT, but also starting to focus on what at the time was called clean tech, and that was solar, wind, biochemicals, and biofuels. Those were kind of the more advanced segments within the industry at the time, some battery things as well. So that was what I was focused on. I started really getting interested in those. And when I went to business school, as you mentioned, I decided that same guy actually gave me the advice on business school. And he said, look, the people that you're going to interact with, you might just have a few beers with them at business school. They're going to become your best friends, and they're going to do unbelievable things in life. And you'll never be able to quantify that impact. And you'll never be able to do a cost benefit analysis on your salary today. But I can tell you it will be meaningful, life-changing, and you'll never regret it. And that was probably the most high impact advice I got to make that move in my career. It turned out to be true much quicker than I expected as well. And he was absolutely correct. And I used that juncture in my career to just stop working, which was awesome after 5 years of working, and just invest in myself and have conviction to go and take this narrow filter and say, if it hits this filter, if it's within dynamic entrepreneurship and environmental impact, positive environmental impact, I'm into it. If it's not all three of those things, I'm not interested. I'm not going to go to that event or whatever, and just focus on that. So that's what I did.
Wow, that's a great answer, and it sort of is a antecedent to the next answer. So I'm gonna probe and push here a little bit. So Don Valentine, the legendary investor at Sequoia Ventures, when asked what he thought about MBAs, he sort of famously and curtly responded, "I'm against them." So I'm wondering, since you're a degree holder from Wharton and an epically successful entrepreneur, first of all, is there any logic that you can point to, that either validates or refutes, Don's point of view, and like, how would you counsel aspiring golden bears on the subject of whether they should or shouldn't invest in MBA? I know you just partly answered that, but particularly if entrepreneurship sounds good to them, the pros and cons.
Yeah. And I think generalizations are always dangerous. I'll suppose that his answer on MBAs, when you think about the birth of Sequoia Capital and then what they focused on, very hardcore technology focused businesses that had massive scale opportunity because of technical disruption. If you're going to go to a business like that, your MBA degree is worth very little. If you're going to start a business like that, you need a deeply technical person to be the entrepreneur leading that exercise. And the people who are financing those ventures are the people like Sequoia, and they've migrated and changed over time as they've added new partners, and they probably would not be so hardcore about that statement anymore. But if I'm just guessing, I have no idea. I'm speculating, but that I do think that's true. And if you look at my business it has a very material science oriented approach, but the industry is footwear and apparel, and it is not a technical thing. It's something where a really sound business mind and an operator's mindset can drive a business to a great place, and you can enable your company with great technology, great material science, and other things that are quite a bit more technical. But it's not the absolute core of the business that makes or breaks the end result. Like, for example, when you invent a new semiconductor, which is, so those are the two differences. So, look, I do think, I guess my point is, understand your strengths and weaknesses. If you're a heavily technical person and you want to go deep in that, a master's degree in computer science is going to serve you a lot better than an MBA will. If you don't think that is the path for you, but you think you want to gain an empathy for working with folks like that and build great businesses in partnership with those, an MBA can be a great asset.
Yeah, to pick up on a previous comment you made too, it's hard to do anything in life by yourself, and the idea of having friends, that knows different, bits of things about life that you can draw on, that you can lean on, that were your classmates at business school, you have a relationship that's kind of deep. That's really valuable, I found. I didn't go to business school, but that sort of network, lots of people, talk about building businesses that rely on a network, and it's an effective way of getting one across disciplines.
Yeah, I mean, you're a successful entrepreneur. I don't know if this resonates with you, but when I'm faced with a hard decision, that I don't have a lot of conviction on when faced with that decision, my modus operandi is to go out to 5 people plus or minus that I think are the smartest to answer that question, and I ask all 5 of them the same exact question. I see what their answers are, and I pick apart with logic what I think resonates with me to be the most successful approach to solving that problem. And in entrepreneurship, the biggest challenge is being very decisive in the face of great ambiguity. And you're never going to have a sufficient amount of data. And to get a sufficient amount of data, or all of the data that you think you might want to have, you're never going to have the time to get that data. So you have to make decisions within a vacuum that has a lot of uncertainty. And so using a board, so to speak, not a board of directors, but like your personal board of advisors that you will go to, is something that I've found incredibly powerful. And I would say the same thing is true of making career decisions for yourself.
Yeah, completely true. It reminds me of, have you read Annie Duke's book, Thinking in Bets? She makes the point that poker players always make decisions with uncertainty, not knowing all the information. And it's so anyway, it's great. She's like, knowing like the difference between decisions where and what you know about them, and then luck, and just understanding how to make the best decision given what you do know. Like, that really resonated with me when I was thinking about entrepreneurship. So it's a great book. You should read it. Okay, so right out of B school, it looks like you go to work as a vice president for a public company. So that's first of all, like an awesome outcome, like coming straight out of B school, like into a role with, a lot of, let's just say, influence. It's a position of influence. Is that right? Did you go right to Solzheim and running the industrial products division?
I did go right to Solzheim, but there was a number of steps I took in that company before I became a vice president there, doing what I ended up doing. And so, what I did, I'll just tell you exactly what I did, just because it might be an inspiration or a lens to someone having an idea on how to do it for themselves. But we had something called the dedicated interview period at Wharton, at the business school, where all these employers would come to campus and they would interview you. And those were the very safe and secure and traditional career paths, things like consulting, banking, things like that, investment management, where you're managing people's money. And I left campus during that period of time and went to the Bay Area and back to the Bay Area and started basically doing an informational interview with, I think it was about 30 companies over 2 weeks. And they were all within that filter that I mentioned, that we're using entrepreneurship to dynamically impact the environment in a positive way. So all those sectors I mentioned that clean tech would cover at the time, I was talking to them, and they were all the more advanced ones that I felt like my commercial mindset, my business mind could play a role in, rather than something that was like still a science project where I didn't think I could add that much value. And that goes again to like, what is the place of an MBA? And so I took a chief of staff job. Actually, it was my first job at Solzheim, where I was working hand in glove with the CEO of the company. He was the founder as well, in helping to drive organizational discipline to the company and operating frameworks. And it was this first job where my analytical mindset and the output of my analytics, like the recommendations, the strategy, the whatever, like here's the answer to a problem, didn't matter. It was this emotional quotient that mattered, and dealing
Yeah.
with people and creating organizational systems. I was like sometimes I would find myself at my desk, like not doing anything. I was like, this is so weird. Like I've never been in this situation where like I don't have a problem to solve that like I can do with data and like give an answer. It's like the hard stuff. And it
Oh,
was
yeah.
such a great growth experience for me. And I ended up vaulting through a whole bunch of different positions after that, a couple, I should say, and then ended up running what we formed as like a business unit to basically take our platform, which what we did, the company was called Solazyme. We engineered microalgae using biotechnology. So basically what that meant was we looked at the genetic pathways and the genetic code of this organism, which was a species of microalgae. It was a single cell organism. And we would use biotech to manipulate the code of that DNA of that organism. Then we would feed it something. We fed it things like sugarcane from Brazil. It would eat that sugarcane, and given whatever the environment we put it in, it would then convert and metabolize the sugar and spit out a product that was a replacement for petroleum. And my segment, if you look at petroleum, it's a barrel of oil. Most of it goes to fuel. Some of it goes to chemicals, and then a variety of other things. I ran the group that was responsible for designing products that could replace petrochemicals. And so anything that's in your life, it's everywhere. The plastic you touch, the lubricants on machines, so many different things, the soaps and surfactants that you use on your skin in the shower. All of those come from petroleum, unfortunately. And we were looking at, and sometimes there's alternatives, we were looking at replacing those with microalgae. And so I was responsible for designing these, working with large multinationals to understand what markets we could affect, and then designing a product into that market, and then translating that into successful business for us, where we could manufacture at large scale and sell to these companies. Unilever was our biggest customer, which is a great example where we were putting our microalgae into their most ubiquitous in Europe soap bar, which is called the Lux soap bar. We don't really use it here in the US, and replace palm oil in that case. And so all doing that with zero carbon impact to the environment. And it was it was an unbelievable experience for me. And we ended up, the company overall raised probably something like $1.5 billion to solve this problem. We had large manufacturing, very global business. I was flying all over the world to get this work done, and had this consistent experience where I would go to these businesses and we would say, here's this product that we can make, and here's what you're doing today. We can make what you're doing today, your product, better, and we can also make it totally sustainable. And they were like, wow, that's mind blowing. Let's do this. And then by the end of the discussion, we'd get into like, the tactical stuff around, all right, how much did it cost? When are you going to spend it? How much can you make? Blah, 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 blah. And they realized that actually what was going to work for them was just doing exactly what they did today and do it cheaper. And the rest of it was kind of greenwashing and lip service to the environment. And it was a very frustrating experience. What I sort of took from that, there's one particular experience, maybe I'll just share the story. I work with actually University of California, San Diego, and a lab there to develop a surfboard made out of microalgae. And it was really cool. It was like carbon neutral. So it was great for the environment. We had a pro surfer called, I think his name was Rob Machado, ride the surfboard in competition. Super cool. And I'm sitting there like, surfers. These are the people that are going to be the most caring for the environment. Understand that if you don't have to trade off performance, but you get to not extract from the planet, it's a win-win. This is great. Let's do this. And no one would buy the surfboard blanks because it was like 10% more. It was like nothing in the grand scheme of things. If you don't know how to market to a surfer and use that as a way to really sell a product and make a very significant business out of it, I think you're an idiot. That was basically the revelation I had. So what I realized was all these cool ingredients are here. Consumers want it. And what they want is something that doesn't detract from performance and doesn't extract from the environment. It's the brands in the middle that are in the way. So like, I should go do something like that. Like, let's forget the old guys. Let's go. And around this time, my knight in shining armor was a professional soccer player And he was this is Tim Brown, who's my co-founder at Allbirds. He went to University of Cincinnati on soccer scholarship, was a student athlete, went on and played about a little over a decade of professional soccer. He was a captain of the New Zealand national team in the 2010 World Cup. So pretty cool prominence he rose to in athletics. And he came around with this shoe idea made out of wool, because he'd been staring at 30 million sheep in New Zealand for a while and figured that would be useful for something. And what we decided was that, like, I started looking at this industry, and like the shoe industry makes 20 billion pairs of shoes a year and pays. I had experience going to try to sell these shoe companies replacements for basically what is, shoes are just either hide from a cow or a bucket of plastic on your feet. That's all they are. And they make it look cool, but it's just plastic, and it's plastic from petroleum, and that's stupid. And so we said, this is an amazing opportunity to lead. We decided we would connect my background on material science that I developed professionally, not from an academic background, but I developed that professionally, particularly at Solazine, and connect that idea to make amazing R&D from nature, turn that into something that's differentiated from a product that people love, connect that to a business strategy where we could sell directly to consumers. And we would then potentially have an opportunity to like systematically disrupt this industry and do something quite different from how they looked at the problem of making shoes. And that was the origin of Tim and I deciding we'd link up and sync our lives together and sync our careers for the next really important bit of our careers in our mid-30s into this challenge.
So my understanding is your wives were friends. Is that right? Is that how you guys initially met?
Yeah, they were roommates at Dartmouth, actually.
Oh, got it. And so how far back does this relationship go? Like roughly, like from a date perspective, when did you guys?
So my wife and his now wife were friends since when I was in college, so over 20 years. I met him for the first time in 2010, just as an acquaintance, because they'd started dating and I was friends with her. And then we kept a light relationship, like meeting at, mutual friends' weddings and things like that. Never thought about business seriously. He actually started a Kickstarter in 2014, which I was one of the first customers of. And the product was awesome. He sent me a women's 10 instead of a men's 10, which I'm still chapped about. And ended up telling me to take out the insult to make it fit better. So his customer service really sucked back then. We've made it a central piece of being a better company now to have good customer service as a retailer at Allbirds. But anyway, he was really struggling with the business side of bringing this into a at scale commercial organization. He started this Kickstarter, and he had probably what he would describe as the most challenging year of his life. And he'd had some like adversity and a lot of challenge, particularly through athletics. And so
Raised 120,000. Is that right? Some around that, like in the Kickstarter.
$120,000 in one day, or maybe 3 days. And back in the day, that was like six years ago. I say back in the day, that was a lot of money. Like Kickstarter now, that you get to millions, but it wasn't happening in this category then. And so it was a big deal. It was a really interesting data point. He ran out
good market signal in that, like
totally. And so for me, like that was, I was reading that. I saw the problem that we could connect. I saw a leadership opportunity. I saw a way to make a business model that if we were more successful financially, we would be more successful from an environmental impact perspective. So those stakeholders are like fully aligned. That was pretty cool. I didn't really, I was thinking about leaving Solazine for about a year and looking at a whole bunch of opportunities that were kind of in that zone, or maybe even in the chemicals, like renewable chemical sector again. And I did so much work doing diligence and figuring out what I wanted to do next. I knew it was going to be entrepreneurial. I knew it was going to be early. I didn't know what it would look like. And I did the least work on this one because the signal was good. I could trust, because I had a proxy in Tim's wife, his girlfriend at the time, that I could trust him as a partner. And everyone wears shoes. So
does this mean that like you never had to have the difficult conversation with your wife about dropping your lucrative career as a biotech exec and you're going to start a shoe company because like they already knew each other and like she trusted you? Or was that like, bring us back to that moment?
No, we definitely had that conversation.
What was it like? Was she worried? Like, how did you guys?
Think like there's not that many career paths that you would point to go from biotechnology to shoemaking. So yeah, no, it sounded a little crazy. And my wife was the catalyst of it, the biggest supporter of it, and never would have done it without her. And she continues to play an incredibly understated and outsized role in the development of what Allbirds is.
As our
And
family members do.
yeah,
Totally.
I mean,
It's one
pretty
team, one mission. It's like you can't.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and what you if anyone gets into entrepreneurship that's listening, and certainly you should understand it, it goes 6 inches into your brain. It's not like, even if you're not working 100 hours, you're thinking about it for 150 hours a week. Like,
Yep.
uh,
Never
and,
stops. So that's a
yeah,
perfect segue. Okay, so I want you to kind of, for anybody who's considering entrepreneurship, uh, let's talk about the first 2 years at Allbirds, like in the role of CEO, founder, co-founder, and then if you can, contrast that with the previous role you were talking about, which is sort of vice president at was Solazine public or private?
yeah.
It's
Yeah,
public, right?
I joined it when it was private and we went public. Yeah.
Yeah, so like it's a different role entirely. Just if you can, we'll start with the Allbirds part because we're there, and then you can contrast that to what it's like to be an executive at a bigger firm.
Sure. Um, yeah. So, and maybe, yeah, I'll maybe even contrast it back to some of the experience I had with very large companies when I was a consultant. That's probably the last time I've been like really in the four walls, deeply entrenched in a big company. Yeah. So starting a company, I mean, look, there was my dog Walt, who's still sitting here next to me. There was me and Tim, and we were in my mother-in-law's apartment and making shit happen. that was that is what you got to do when you start a company. It's having
So
the understanding that like an individual with tenacity and creativity can completely change a huge industry, and believing in yourself that you can do that. But it really starts with a couple people in a room. And
yeah, yeah. I was telling Rob the other day, at least this is my experience, but it sort of feels like thousands of mundane tasks performed at high speed. It's like not the flashy, splashy headline from TechCrunch about like raising millions of dollars. It's like we got to put like little file tabs on the file folders, and we got to go call these customers, and we got to go figure out like who our vendor is, and like why isn't that guy paying us, and why is this cost, like all these things, like really fast. Like 10,000 decisions in your first year, and yeah, it's
yeah, and I think there's the way that I've always approached these things, and then was very much true at Allbirds, was be very intentional and have a lot of clarity and conviction around what you are going to do, and believe in it until data suggests that you were wrong. Continue to believe in it and doggedly fight after that outcome. And so what we did actually, before we started the business, when I was still at Solazine, we wrote a business plan together, and we did it not, the main reason we did it was to get alignment on what were the big decisions that we would make to make us ultimately successful. And what that did was, it was really nice because you're in this environment where a lot of smart people are giving you advice and telling you what to do. And,
like investors, like
everybody,
mentors, like everybody, like just
everybody
swirling around you.
When you're starting a business, everybody thinks they know more than you, and that they think they have solid advice to tell you. And some people do, and some people don't, and you just got to ferret that out. But that's why getting intentionality and conviction in what you're going to do served us really well, because we said no 99 times for every one thing we said yes to. And that allowed us to not do 10,000 things. We actually, we did try to do like 5 things and just do them super well. We ended up taking that approach. We raised some money. So that was one aspect of the job that I've had to do the number of times. I think we've done it 6 times now on the equity side. So we've raised money from venture capitalists and other investors. We've raised, I don't know, something like $200 million now. So it's quite a bit now. But back then in 2015, we raised $2 million to get off the ground, and then allocated that money and just focused it on the 3 things that we knew we needed to do to win and to give us the best shot at success. And that's all we spent our money on, nothing else. We spent nothing on anything else, basically, or the minimal we could get away with. And that's how we then hired. That's how we hired people. That's how we focused our hiring efforts. That's how we focused our daily lives and our activities. That's how we focused what we, how we raised money, what we spent it on. And it gave us a really great experiment where we did a huge amount of work to launch the company, and we did it with one shoe. And in 2016, on March 1st, we launched in New Zealand and in America. Time magazine said it was the most comfortable shoe in the world. And we were off to the races. We did $1 million in shoe sales in the first month that we were in business, in that first month of March. And we were off to the races. And then we've, the tasks have evolved significantly since those early days. We've learned a lot in that time. And, some of those things, just to
you guys were direct to consumer, right? No wholesale.
Yeah. And we continue to be.
And is that because, there's slightly better margin and that helps pick up the maybe the extra costs that you were referring to before, the extra 10% that somebody would have to pay to make a truly green renewable product?
That's part of it. It's a lot of factors that go into this, but technology has allowed us to reach consumers more effectively today. So we can reach people through social media. There's platforms that enable you to transact commerce without a lot of investment in technology itself, just buying things off the shelf. We have a platform we use called Shopify that's really enabled us to have very easy commerce. And so we would, where we weren't inventing something, we would just buy it off the shelf. That was kind of always our mantra. When we would invent something, we would go deep. And we invented a really cool new fabric that had never been used in shoes before. We started a series of different inventions on material science side that we connected into shoes. And that's where we focus so much of our energy. And still to this day, I go deep into the science of what we're investing in from a materials perspective, because it's so hard to do and it takes so long that we need to really concentrate our bets on what materials we think are going to translate to great products. And so I still spend a lot of my time doing that. That's now at a more strategic level, and I have people interacting with the companies that are leading the charge on the real R&D and innovation that are working with me alongside me to do that. A lot of financial management is my job now versus back then. It was really every single detail on the product we would sweat. I would be in the factory every other month, and our factory was in Korea at the time, and making every tiny little decision, making every decision about the words on the website, sweating every tiny little detail because it all mattered. And just working our tails off, like so many hours, so much travel, so much anxiety and energy. And it was like when we launched the product and we were pretty successful in the first go of it, it was like this big weight off. And then also like such a weird feeling because I didn't realize how much stress was on me. And it's like, it is the most, high anxiety I could ever picture. I remember a particular time we had just taken $2 million and we found out that our factory wasn't going to work out. It was going to be in Eastern Europe and it was never going to work. And we lost the factory and we had to find a new factory. We had 8 months to launch the product, which is the timeline we gave ourselves. It usually takes 18 months to go soup to nuts on product development for a new shoe. And so we were starting really far behind and ended up creating this little horse race of about 3 factories we found. One from a friend of mine who I played soccer with actually at Cal. It's a phenomenal soccer player named Chris Ronier, who's working with shoe factories in Asia and connected me with one. And that was eventually the one that we ended up working with. And still to this day, where they're exclusive customer, and we make a lot of pairs with them, still in Korea and very loyal to these guys. And so just through like scrappiness and persistence, you break through walls. And if you don't do that, you're never going to win in entrepreneurship. But that was the approach that we took early on, and that consumed a huge amount of what I was doing at that time.
That is so exactly what entrepreneurship is like in the first 2 years. It's regularly landing the plane without one wing, just because like stuff comes up. Now, can you bring us back to like a public company? What are the cadences in a public company as an executive, if you're like entrepreneurship, I don't know, that sounds pretty crazy. Like I'd rather go, get a paycheck and like work inside of a big firm and manage a product line or something, or a business unit. Like how is it? Like how do you remember that being different? And was it
Yeah, I
useful
mean,
to you at all? Like as an entrepreneur, that's like a second part of the question.
yeah, it can be incredibly useful. It's better. It's always better to go big to small than small to big. If you go from a small company, your skills are a lot less useful in a big company, I think. If you take skills from a big company, they can be transferred very effectively into a small company. Not to say that that's easy, and I've hired lots of executives who have failed in entrepreneurship because they think going from 10 to 1 is easy, when actually what you're asking them to do is go from 0 to 1. And that's very, very difficult. It's a different skill set. So it's still hard, but the skills are very useful. I would say that just to compare and contrast, like my day as a leader of a small company, still to this day, and certainly true when we started, was extraordinarily broad scope and narrow depth. And when you're at a large company, typically you're gonna have a much narrower scope of responsibility, and you're going much deeper. And the impact of what you do with that narrow scope can be quite big because the company has large scale. So, for example, you're making a small marketing decision if you're in the product marketing department of the consumer company. But you might be selling, 40 million widgets of whatever you make. And so the impact of that little marketing decision is very, very significant. And the budgets are very large. So what you get good at is understanding how to make decisions that have very significant impact, but you're focused on a very narrow scope. And if you get a broad swath of these, and being a product manager in technology is a really great example of one where you really get this commercial mindset of how to bring a product to life, how to talk to customers to make sure you're making solutions that meet the needs that they have, and that you're solving a problem that they're willing to pay for. That's a beautiful position within technology to launch a career, because you learn that breadth while still focused, and you're gaining these skills that are very transferable to entrepreneurship. And big company, there's a whole bunch of different things you can pick up, and I think that's why consulting for me was something I was interested in, getting that like broad education. And then when I was interested in entrepreneurship, I could translate some of those experiences that were kind of I had to piece them together, but learned a lot from each of those because of that intellectual curiosity that I really hold dear to helping steer my life, and then apply that into a specific problem and be able to be decisive under uncertainty.
Yeah, that makes total sense. We actually had a product manager from technology software on the show recently. We were talking about that, like sitting in the intersection between like the business side of your business, users, engineering, and then like your design group. And you have like in that job, you've got better knowledge, about your product than like anybody else. And so that's why it's a good analogy for like being the CEO of a firm, where you're sitting at the intersection of all the different functions in your particular business, and like you have better knowledge about your organization than anybody else, and you're seeing things like, okay, this happened over there, that's like going to make these changes over here, and so forth. So
there's analogies in other industries that's not product management that has the same thing. But one thing that I think is so unique about that role is that you're using a lot of highly analytical skills to understand user behavior. And you're also using a lot of EQ skills to like deal with designers on one hand, which is, they have a particular way of working, and engineers who have a completely different way of working, and getting collaboration amongst very diverse groups of thinkers to come together and make a product that works for those customers. Like that getting something where you blend those two skills allows you to develop leadership attributes that are useful, as well as analytical skills that are also quite useful. Because now, like, my job is much more around looking at big picture outcomes from what the indicators of our business are suggesting, how we're headed. Look at the red lights, the yellow lights, and the green lights when we see things change, and understand and then make big strategic decisions and bets with our capital on where we invest people, money, and energy to make those things change, to go in the right direction, and then just deal with people. And those are basically, that's the entirety of my job now, is dealing with people, hiring, firing, organization, management, performance management, motivation, culture, and then those big strategic bets. That's it. And that I think is the role of an executive at a large company completely. And in entrepreneurship, you get there after you hit, a few hundred people in your company. And I think that's generally where you end up with.
Yeah, I was. In fact, I was just going to ask you, how's your perception of the CEO role changed? As you've sort of established growth and scale. So you pretty much just answered that. I wonder also, have you ever read Ben Horowitz's like seminal piece on cash flow and destiny?
I don't remember that specific. I know I've read his book, Hard Things About Hard Things or something.
That's a great book. He pins it. But anyway, this idea is like, this is also for entrepreneurs. If you're selling something, the moment when you don't have to rely, Allbirds is now profitable, I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Yeah. So when you don't have to rely on venture financing anymore, he's like, you don't think that makes a difference in your decision? It absolutely makes a decision, the difference in like how you think about like your company and what you're going to do. So like where was that for you? How fast did you guys get profitable? How many times did you go back into the cash trough?
Well, it's been interesting. I think the goalposts have moved on our business, and I like to. I've had this kind of mindset. You asked me how my wife and I decided that we would take this venture on. We had a conversation where I said we were going to find out. We would start this business and we would find out whether it was successful or if it was a failure within 2 years. And I would not allow it to happen that we would be in the middle. We would find one of those two outcomes. The middle petrified me. And so we took that mindset to the business and we made big bets that would either work really well or would fail miserably, but quickly. And I think that's a really smart way to start a business because particularly I was like 34 or something like that. And like, that's an important part of your life when you're like developing skills that you can transfer to like, create great outcomes and great opportunities for yourself down the road. And so, sinking a lot of time, that's a big deal. I mean, that my time is the only thing, it's the only thing you got on earth. So, so we said 2 years, we'll figure this out. And we raised money and we had that in mind. And what I figured at the time was we'd raise money once, we would hopefully be very successful, raise money one more time, and then we'd be profitable forever. And that was the plan. And, more or less it worked actually. And yet once we got to that point, we became profitable right out of the gate. We were profitable in our first full year. And that was, so by 2016, end of 2016, we were profitable. And, but then we said, shit, we're onto something much bigger here. Let's take all that profit plus some and start investing that in the business.
Yeah.
And we started making big bets on a whole number of variables, R&D, categories of product we would go into, channels that we wanted to sell in. So we started adding brick and mortar to our operation instead of just digital, which takes a lot of capital and a lot of other work. And then we said international. Let's go big international really early, much earlier than most businesses do. So we're in 35 countries today. We have teams on the ground in China, Japan, Korea, in Europe, and in the UK and Germany, and in the United States, in a couple places. And so we're super global. That took a lot of money. So we started reinvesting that, and that forced us to make a decision. Should we go out and try for something massive and raise money to support that? Or should we be comfortable with where we're at, maybe sell the business to some other larger company? We said the impact we can make is huge. The satisfaction on our personal lives and the culture we're creating and the satisfaction that's going to create for our employees is so great. And the financial outcomes can be good for employees and for our investors. Let's take money. It's worth it. And so we've gone on, they usually in venture capital, they call it like Series A, Series B, et cetera. So we're up to Series E now, which I always thought was ridiculous, but now I'm living it. So here we are. So we're Series E, and we've raised $200 million, something like that, in that ballpark. And we are, and so we're running a huge opportunity. And the thing that I get comforted by is, Nike makes 500 million pairs of shoes a year. Adidas, kind of same ballpark. And 20 billion pairs are made every year globally. Like 1% of that is so big. That like you could make an absolutely enormous business with 1%. And we're not even close to that yet. So
Yeah.
there's such a big opportunity here if we execute well and
Yeah.
we have conviction around our values and we express those effectively through our marketing and we make great products that deliver on the promise that we're creating for customers. We're going to be a really big, important business. And that's what excites me.
Okay. So that makes total sense. I want to return to the subject of, this is for our entrepreneur listeners, choosing your co-founder, among the most, if not the most consequential decision that you'll make as an entrepreneur. You spend so much time with that person. You make, thousands of decisions, which honestly, a lot of them are really like bets, like you're pointing out. And, there's all these people that are swirling around giving you advice and so forth. And then on top of that, you guys decide you're going to be co-CEOs, which again is just the emotional complexity, like in making that work inside an organization where lots of people need to know what to do. Like, how did you guys do it? And how did you stay together with Tim, from the early days and kind of, manage through this growth and scale and so forth?
Yeah, well, the relationship is built on mutual admiration and respect. And if you don't have that with your partner, then yeah, probably not going to work out, regardless of what you title yourselves.
Yeah.
We went with co-CEOs for a number of reasons, but I guess before I say that, the most important aspect of beyond the foundation of mutual admiration and respect and trust is that we have very complementary skills. I have a deep knowledge of material science, manufacturing, entrepreneurial, like scaling. I shouldn't say deep expertise, but at least some expertise. I've had some experiences there. Tim is on the design and intuitive creative marketing side. And that was not something I'd spent any of my career on. And so we knew we had these strengths respectively, and that we could organize the business around those strengths. So the functional responsibilities sit in those buckets. And he manages the creative and the brand marketing side of the business, and I do the rest of the business, and that's where our strengths lie, and where we can't do so. So it made a lot of sense, and I think the idea that a single person needs to make every decision at the end of the day, I think is it seems like it's sort of from like military, or I don't know, sort of like different ways empires have been built and collapsed, but empires do collapse, militaries fail, they lose wars. And I would challenge the idea that a single leader with a single voice every time is always the right solution. I think there's a lot of cases where there's failures in dual CEO roles. And so I think people point to those a lot, but there's way more examples of single CEOs failing. I think people would argue that it's not because of the structure, but I think that's sometimes a failed argument. And I think as long as you come into an opportunity with the right amount of humility, admiration, and respect for your partner, whether you title it a co-CEO or not, I don't think matters, but I don't think you'll be successful if you keep a very lonely environment and you're the head honcho calling all the shots. And I know some leaders who do it that way, and it looks miserable, lonely, and I think the outcomes are much worse.
Yeah, it's interesting. We have another one of our former board members, another Golden Bear, Dave Butler, basketball player, is currently co-CEO of Dimensional Fund Advisors in Austin. So they're making it work too. So we've certainly seen both, but I think it's a provocative and interesting question. And managing whole companies of people is emotionally complex. You mentioned that previously. Like you can read something about like how to let's just say extract data from here, you add, A plus B and you get an answer. But, like doing that with actual people and the emotional complexities of actual people, like is a hard thing. And so, but it sounds like you guys have the exact right mindset and trust and admiration and the things and complementary skill sets couldn't be more important. I mean, that's like what you're doing in a say software business is the equivalent of a hustler hacker combination in a software business. Where you have the sort of the technologist and the business person. But did the fact that you guys played soccer, the two of you and Tim, did that have any bearing on your like mutual admiration, or did you feel like you were grounded in a shared experience? Or
look, I think the fact that we were both competitive athletes, he obviously did a lot more than I did and a lot better. But the fact that we have that background, I think it created a couple of things. Like from my experience at Cal, take a few things as an athlete. First of all, it was the most diverse ethnically situation that I've ever been in, where people's backgrounds on that dimension had absolutely no bearing on what people thought of you. It was just whether you were good at what you were supposed to do on the field or not. And learning how a meritocracy like that can create an incredibly rich and rewarding and diverse environment was something that I always reflected on, and that was so interesting about athletics, and was like the great equalizer. And I think both of us have taken that into our business. The second thing is around discipline, and the third is just about maybe secondarily the discipline to always get better, and to never think that you've been successful enough because there's always somebody waiting to take your spot on the field, or always somebody out there on the other team that can be better than you. And those disciplines are what drive our business. We're extremely competitive. I mean, I'm extremely competitive. Like, I want to kill our competition. Nice. And I think, and yeah, I mean, we do that in the most loving way. I mean, we're not out there doing bad things to get that outcome. Not
to make the best possible
environment. No, but it's it's that mindset. You got to have that to be a successful athlete, and I think that drives us in our daily lives and our business too.
So perfect. On that note, like, we'd like to shift to sort of you've talked about some of them just now, but some of the intangible benefits of investing thousands of hours on the pitch, running, and so forth. Like, our audience is, as student athletes, very interested whether those sensibilities, are transferable to post-sports careers. And so I'm going to turn the mic over to Jake, and he's got a question on that.
Hey, Joey. Yeah, I mean, you kind of answered a little bit of it, but, people always hear about the advantages embedded in the mindset of former athletes at work, and, what gives the athletes an edge in the workforce or whatever they're doing. For example, the book Mindset, written by Stanford professor Carol Dweck, that's a very popular one. My question was kind of, is that truth or hype? First, you kind of answered it, but if truth, what, do you feel like you have any soccer-related superpowers, or those days on the pitch that give you an edge at Allbirds? I know you kind of touched on it, but is there any specific tangible examples that from your days at Cal beforehand or whatnot?
Yeah. I think first of all, I can't believe you quoted a Stanford professor on here, but we'll give you a pass.
Nobody's perfect.
Yeah. No, but I mean, look, team sports are amazing, right? Like, people have good days and bad days, and you have an empathy for someone having a bad day. And that down the road, because you've seen them perform, that they're going to have a good day. Maybe today is just not that day. And what do you do in that situation? And how do you deal with the person psychologically? And how do you deal with it, like, tactically, like when they're actually not delivering what you need them to deliver? That is the soft skill of managing an organization. And I think the teamwork, the camaraderie, the shared objective, and one team, one dream sort of mentality is what running a business is. And if you don't have that, you probably have a toxic culture. And so the lessons that you learn in empathy and competition are highly transferable. They're very soft. And so, a lot of people, if you say that in a job interview, you're probably not going to go very far, but I do think that, but I think they're real. They're really real. And as you rise up in an organization, I think they become ever more present. And those become increasingly important. And so I think very highly of that. I think the similar is true from military experiences. When people I've worked with those backgrounds, I don't personally have that, but I think similar lessons learned in leadership and teamwork are something that are really important in the workplace.
Yeah, I mean, my co-founder is a Marine, or I should say, he is. We're no longer working together on the business, but Marines, they always like to say, once a Marine, always a Marine. But that was really helpful, like, for my understanding personally, and he brought a lot of that influence into our company. So I know what you mean.
And Joey, when you spoke about the ethnic diversity back when you played, it is, I mean, as you may have known when you spoke to the team, there's 30 teams at Cal, and we are the most ethnically diverse team at Cal. So it just happens that way, and maybe soccer's the world sport and whatnot, but that definitely plays a huge part in our guys and what they take from the Cal experience.
Yeah, and I mean, it's sad because it's so unique. In the workplace, it's not like that typically, and even in school, like it becomes, there's just people tend to gravitate to people that look and sound like themselves because you're more comfortable, and so you naturally have this like self-selected segregation based on like particular things, and it's not true in soccer at Cal. And it was really cool. It was really eye-opening. It actually led me down a path of doing a lot of nonprofit work in that space for equalization of access to education for inner city kids in particular, with an organization called Styles Hall, which is a wonderful organization affiliated with Cal that I'm still on the board of, and actually starting an organization affiliated with Styles now that's focused on getting Black, Latino, Native American kids into entrepreneurship early. It's called Colorwave, and that is that's something where it's really important, and it adds a richness to an experience, and it creates better outcomes. So it's not just like a morality question, albeit it is a morality question. It's also a question of better outcomes, and this is where I think the proof is in the pudding in Cal Soccer, and it's a great program, and that's I think that's a big part of it.
It's fantastic.
Joey, I've got one final question for you right here. And the fact is 98% of Cal student athletes go pro in something that's not their sport right when they graduate Cal. And then you got like 2% of people that do go pro in their sport, and then they go pro in a non-sport career like right after that. So my question is, if you yourself right now, 40 something years old, could have a conversation with your 22-year-old self going through that transition, what's your advice and what are you going to say?
I got an addendum too. I want to mention this is really important, Joey, because like we've heard very poignantly from this group that this transition that Rob was just alluding to is really difficult. It can be really difficult. Athletes have described the feeling of being untethered, like deeply uncertain about who they'll become, like how life will unfold, like do they have any skills other than their athletic skills and so forth. So what would you, how does that like hit you?
Yeah. So first of all, Rob, I'm 39. I took offense to that description of that question. That's okay. So, it's really important what you just said. The 2% of people who go pro still go pro in something else after. And I can tell you, I work with a lot of professional athletes now, and I love doing it. We have investors that are professional athletes in the NBA and professional soccer leagues and the English Premier League and a bunch of others. And those people are also scared about what's going to happen when they retire. Not because they don't have enough money in some of the cases of the people who made a ton of money, but because of their personal fulfillment. Like, what are they going to do with their lives? And that's equally as important. It's not just a financial thing. It's about what are you going to do in life? And so I guess the overarching thought that I have, having lived it myself, but then more so because I wasn't like the longest athletic career in the world, seeing other people do it, is not being so one-dimensional about your sport. Like, when you can truly think about what are the things that you want to build as skills, what are the hobbies that you're interested in, what are the things the passions that motivate you, that you think you could sink a large portion of your life into, and if you make that choice 10 years down the road, would you still be as excited as you are today? And you might get that wrong, but force yourself to make those decisions. Think about that, and then get into it and start working on those things on the side. Like, if it's investing, like find a way to like work on some investing when you're doing either your collegiate or your professional. Even if you don't have a lot of money, like there's tons of different things that you can get into these activities. And I would highly encourage people to start to diversify the way they look at the world very, very early, and do that in college. Hopefully you've already started to do it before that, but do it in college, do it when you're a professional athlete, do it all along the way, because, it's just like, you hear the same thing about people who retire from long, decades of a career as a doctor. They retire, and then like they're so crazy they get divorced because their partners are now like can't even handle them because they have no hobbies. They don't know what to do. They're lost. You got to develop these things early. They take time to figure out, and they're really hard. And I think a rich life is one that's filled with a number of different activities, hobbies, interests. And I think you'll be personally rewarded if there's some values that bring them together, but they're not just one dimensional. And I would just encourage people to really think about this early and often.
Yeah, you said the key to life is a creative curiosity, something like that in the beginning. And, this sort of duality that you're mentioning, like, hey, being interested in my sport and also being interested in other things that you may want to do at the same time. Everybody can walk and chew gum. Why shouldn't that be the same for athletes?
Yeah. And you should walk and chew gum. You should walk and chew gum. And like, as an athlete, you're equipped to do that better than almost anybody. I get that there's a lot of time commitment when you're in college playing a sport. I mean, I remember calculating it was like 28 hours a week and you're exhausted afterwards. And so it's hard to do other stuff, but just do it. I mean, you just got to do it because it's otherwise you're going to have a traumatic situation at the transference. And if you don't, you're going to seamlessly move to something and have conviction and confidence in yourself that you're going to be successful in the next chapter.
Great advice.
Awesome. And then how can our listeners follow you? How can they reach you?
I'm not the most public person in the world, but check out Allbirds. Go to allbirds.com. I do a bunch of writing. I'm on LinkedIn. Connect with me. Anyone who's interested in the area of entrepreneurship and making an impact on the environment in particular. And there's always going to be a soft spot for Cal athletes in my heart. So get out there and love to be in touch.
Nice. Joey, that was an insight bomb. Thank you so much for your time today. That was really, really, really good.
Awesome.
Really useful.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Go Bears.
Go Bears, guys. Thanks a lot.
Joey.